Hey guys, it's Kevin83 here, and what I'm going to bring you today is an investigation of a issue we found in the Wario Land II TAS when we tried to play it back on the original Game Boy player hardware. I'm going to call this a console accuracy adventure in Wario Land 2. So, Wario Land 2 was a pretty popular release on the original Game Boy, popular enough even that it got a color re-release when they did the Game Boy Color, like they did with Link's Awakening DX. But this investigation is referring specifically to the original Game Boy non-color cartridge. You can see the cartridge I have here. It's a gray cart, and the re-released one was done in black. So, recently, TAS Videos community member JLoon2 became interested in improving and resyncing Wario Land 2's tool-assisted speedruns to playback on the original hardware. Now that we have the emulation accuracy capability and the capability to play back original TASs on the Game Boy player hardware. Now, a little bit of background. The Game Boy player is a Game Boy Advance. There's no emulation going on there, and the Game Boy Advance has a Game Boy Color in it. There's no emulation going on there either. So when we play a Wario Land 2 cartridge in a Game Boy player in RTA or in TAS, it is playing on the original Game Boy Color hardware, exactly as it would as if you would play on a Game Boy Color, except for a single bit flipped in the BIOS that lets the game know that it's a Game Boy Advance. But no games, except for like maybe one or two, interact with that flag. There's like a select couple. Anyway, the point is, it's the same. In 99.999% of scenarios, playing on the Game Boy player will get you the exact same hardware behavior as the Game Boy Color. Now, such a level of accuracy is also available in BizHawk's Gambatte emulator and BizHawk emulator. In the GBA as GBC mode and with the save RAM emulated in a specific way, we can get about 15 different cartridges known syncing exactly between the Game Boy player hardware and the emulator even. So even the emulator is almost doing, in 99.999% of scenarios, exactly what the original Game Boy Color did. So games like Mickey's Chase, very popular but strange game. The original Super Mario Land will sync between the emulator and the console. Actually, I have two copies of Super Mario Land because there's two different revisions, and both of the revisions sync. Dr. Mario is known to sync. There's an obscure game, Pinball Fantasy, that's very difficult to emulate. That even syncs. If you guys know of or have heard of that game from different emulator accuracy investigations that have been done before. Tetris, that syncs. The original Game Boy Tetris, you can play Game Boy Tetris games. And then I have my Pokemon library, Pokemon Crystal, Blue, we have Red, we have TCG, all of these games, Gold, and Yellow. So about 15 games. All the games I just showed there, those are the ones that are known. If we take a TAS of that game that's been done, like a full long TAS that tests several sections of a run, and play it back, exported for the Game Boy hardware, it will do exactly the same thing on the console that we get in the emulator. So, we wanted to test this for another game, Wario Land 2, because somebody wanted to get that one also playing back on the original hardware. And there is one scenario that we know of where a game might not sync perfectly. That is Donkey Kong 94 for the Game Boy. I'll show that here. Donkey Kong 94. And that game, it actually seeds its RNG from something that doesn't exist. So from a spot of RAM on the console that it hasn't initialized. So it actually does a great job for getting randomness because it's the closest thing you can get to truly random. Like, every time you boot up the game, you will get different stuff in this uninitialized RAM area. It's just electrical signals floating around. non-deterministically. Unlike everything else that the Game Boy does, the RAM is not necessarily the same state every time you boot it up. So, Donkey Kong 94, not possible to sync because it has these 16 different possible RNG states, and you can't necessarily line them all up perfectly. There is still work being done looking into it, but that was the trickiest one we've got so far to sync because of that issue. So, we know that Wario Land 2 does not do this sort of behavior. It doesn't read from uninitialized RAM, so we would expect it to sync just fine. So, Wario Land 2, we plop this guy in the Game Boy player, play it back, and I can show you guys here exactly what we saw on the console when we did this playback. I'll transition here. So you can see level 2-3 starting up here. He goes right, and then he starts doing some out-of-bounds tricks. And then suddenly there's 17 coins in the right and 16 coins on the right. And 17 coins on the left, 16 coins on the right. On the right side, the game finishes the level in out-of-bounds, and the left side it doesn't. So I'll just play a couple times, because it's going to be difficult to pick up on if we don't let it play a couple times and really see that exact point where things change. Okay, so let's do it one more time. He's running right, out of bounds, everything's still lined up, and then boom, 17 coins to 16 coins. The left side hits an extra coin and gets stuck on the wall, doesn't get out of bounds, and can't finish the level. So the console is not able to finish the level, and on the right side, the emulator does finish the level. So that's a comparison of what happened between the console on the left side and the emulator on the right side when we played back the TAS. So what do we do? Now we've established that something is happening that's not what we expected from the behavior in the emulator. Well, Alyosha, an emulator dev in the TAS video scene, was able to identify by looking at the processing that happens on that frame of desync that the inaccuracy was not related to any of the crazy stuff going on with out of bounds, but rather a coincidence with the timing of a VRAM read. So here's how this works. When you've got an old game like this, an old game system, it draws the pixels from left to right. I'll do it backwards so you guys can get, but from left to right, 160 pixels, and then it switches into this thing called mode 0, where it can mess with the tile data. You wouldn't want to like change the tile data or read from it while the pixel processing unit is actually trying to draw the pixels. So the CPU isn't allowed to access it or write to it during this section, but then it gets access again in this little window at the end of each scan line. And then it wraps and does the next scan line and does the next scan line one at a time. What the game did is, and what Alyosha found is, that the game happens to read from the tile data, the video RAM, at the exact moment of the shift between the scan line printing and that little extra space it has to process things. So now that we knew this, like, okay, this kind of makes sense. That could be a place where something could go wrong if you tried to access it at exactly the point of the handoff. Maybe that makes sense. So I went over to the Game Boy emulator development community, GBDev. They have their own Discord, and I asked them, hey, could somebody make a test ROM of this scenario, like, and show what actually happens visually on the hardware in this scenario? So then this test ROM was made by Matt Curry, and now you're seeing on the Game Boy player the test ROM playing. And this is what you can see this visually. FF means we're blocked. We're doing the printing of the scan line still. It's going across. We can't access anything, and then it goes. So it's going FF. You can't read me yet. Oh, and then it goes 0, 0. So 0, 0 is what happens in the Wario Land 2 TAS. It accesses the video RAM at the exact moment of the handoff and gets this garbage data that isn't the blocked FF or the actual tile data that it's trying to get in the 1.1. 1.1 is what's stored in the video RAM for the tile data. So that's not good. That's something that hadn't been documented before in the Game Boy hardware. So we have to try to emulate that. And then what you can see further is this scenario doesn't happen every time. Like once you've encountered the corner case, it doesn't happen again. It never goes back and happens again. So we have to implement that if you try to read the video RAM at this exact moment and you've never done it before. Because if you've done it before, then it's not going to happen again. And then there's a third thing. There's a third thing actually going on here. Because that first group of 3 is all with a specific address range. And then the next group of 3 is with a different address range. What happens is, in the address range below, this bug doesn't happen. The video RAM is from usually O by 8000 to O by A000, and what you see is that the bug only happens in the range O by 8000 to O by 9000, and in the O by 9000 to A000. This is hex values. In that second half of the range, the access timing quirk doesn't apply. So you have to... So Wario Land 2 managed to somehow read video RAM at the exact moment of the handoff and from below a certain point, and do so for the very first point in the entire run at like several minutes into the run, just randomly. So that's why it was so difficult to track down, and why nobody had ever run into this before when developing an emulator. So I was able to implement the behavior in the emulator for BizHawk Gambatte. And what we can see now, if I flip back to that, is the Wario Land II TAS will now play like it did in the console side of the comparison. We'll just fast forward seek here to level 2-3. Okay, gotta go back just a little bit here. So you can see here, he's out of bounds, got 16 coins, and now in the emulator, he hits coin 17. I'm going to shift it up so you guys can see the 17. So you can see along the top bar, though, that we're in the emulator, and we're not on the console right now. And now I'll just move the emulator window up so you can see the coin count this time when I play it. And we'll go back again a little bit. So he goes up, gets to 16 coins, and now on the console and in the emulator both, we get the 17 coin and he gets stuck. And we love that. We actually want him to get stuck because then J-Loon can account for that when J-Loon goes back to try to make the TAS again. So, but this is not the whole picture of the whole scenario. We want to match the test ROM. We want to match Wario Land 2, but we also don't want to break anything else that's been done before, right? We wouldn't want to fix this bug and then go back 2 months later and make a TAS of Pokemon Yellow or some other game that I really care about, Pokemon Crystal, like those are those iconic other classic Game Boy titles, and then have it not sync because we broke something. So I handed the fix I made back to the Pokemon speedrunning Gambatte speedrun devs, and they validated it against the suite of 5,000 test ROMs that we have, and it actually found the problem. And what that problem was, and I can play it back here if I flip back to the Game Boy player, there's actually a lot more even going on with the quirk because we're on the Game Boy Color. There's this extra problem of double speed mode. So this one time here indicates that we're in the original Game Boy's speed mode, the 4,000 megahertz, but you can also switch into a double speed mode because the Game Boy Color can operate at 8,000 8 megahertz, 4 megahertz to 8 megahertz. And this is what happens if you are in double speed mode. You can't encounter the bug. You get blocked FFF, and then you still get blocked on the time where in the single speed mode, there's this access quirk. And there's another test ROM that had to be made for odd mode, which is odd. It's a further bug that was already known to happen where you can shift access timing slightly with a complex series of operations, and now we actually hit the quirk one cycle later than we would expected to previously. And so if we run all of these tests now, I was able to accommodate for all of them and fix the test that failed in the Gambatte speedrun development community. And so we're accounting for Wario Land 2's behavior on hardware. We're accounting for the test ROMs that were already existing in the Gambatte speedrun dev community, and we're accounting for the test ROMs that were newly created for this specific scenario to completely vet it out. Now, that's just the Game Boy Color. There's also more investigation and work that needs to be done to make it accurate for the original Game Boy, but we can't test the hardware accuracy as easily because we don't have that whole pipeline verifying TASs with the Game Boy Player and Extremes' Game Boy interface. But I'm super excited about this. Jaloon can go back now and try to implement exactly the behavior on console and get that TAS syncing all the way through. And yeah, if you guys enjoy this sort of investigation, I do it all the time on twitch.tv/TyCommunity3, making TASs, syncing them on console for the Game Boy. And then if you are interested more in the TASing side specifically, or the verification side, TAS Videos is a great site and is a great Discord for emulator TASing. TAS Bot Discord is very helpful for the console verification side of TASing. And there, like I mentioned, the Game Boy development community has their own Discord, GBDev Discord, and you can find that easily too, searching around through their various repositories. And yeah, if you I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I hope you have a great rest of your day and week, and hope everything's going well with you guys.